Good morning and welcome. I am pleased to announce that our detectives have made an arrest in the attempted sexual battery at Lake Hollingsworth. Earlier this morning, detectives took William J. McGee, 37 years of age, into custody. Detectives have interviewed the subject and charged him with attempted sexual battery and kidnapping. We wish to thank the community for their tips and assistance in bringing this case to a successful conclusion. Sergeants Gary Gross and Captain Victor White will provide further information and answer your questions. Again, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to take you back to the night of May the 19th when this incident occurred. I'll give you a brief overview of that. Our victim had just got off work, and it was conducive for her at that time to go for a run around Lake Hollingsworth. She was on the southeast side of the lake in the area of Belmar, jogging, and she thought she heard somebody coming up behind her. She looked back and she could see the suspect running. She picked up her pace a little bit. He kept getting closer. The last thing that she knew was that an arm was coming around her neck. He gagged her, put his hand around her mouth, dragged her off into the bushes. There was some dialogue at that point where he began to try to pull her shorts off, threatening her. And she fought back as much as she could, and then she decided it would be in her best interest at that point to try to talk to this guy and try to talk him through this. And that was probably the best thing that she did that kept her alive, was she began to personalize with him. They got on a first-name basis. She told him what her name was. He said, "My name's Will." They began to talk. They eventually got up. She got his mind off of the task, the violent attack on her, and during that struggle, she was bruised up a little bit, she was scratched, and she was able to scratch him. And they got back onto the running path, and they continued to walk, and she continued to talk to him. And then at some point, she felt that was a time to make a break and to take off running. He didn't have his shoes on, and that was a factor that she noticed that I can outrun him, I need to, I've got to survive. And that's what she did. She took off running. He went the other way, and then shortly thereafter, she was able to get her cell phone and call 911, call the police, and we responded that night, and that's where we went into the search and everything we could to try to find this suspect. So obviously we've made an arrest. At this point, I'm going to turn this over to Captain Victor White. He's going to walk you through the criminal investigation and what led up to this morning's arrest of this suspect.
Thank you, Gary. I'd like to first recognize Detective Paula Tolbert and her supervisor, Sergeant Chip Roberts, who's in the back of the room. It was these two that who were ultimately responsible for bringing this case to a successful resolution. We first began this case by having the victim meet with our forensic artist for the purpose of attempting to create a likeness of the suspect. The likeness was shared to the media as well as Crime Stoppers. Almost immediately, we began receiving tips from the community. We received them from other agencies and a great many members of our organization. We collected some items initially after the incident that we felt could possibly contain evidence that would assist us in identifying the suspect. These items were taken to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement's crime lab for analysis. And I got to tell you, we worked very closely with them in an attempt to expedite the analysis of these items. About a week ago, we took a closer look at an individual we felt may have been a suspect. Detective Tolbert received consent from this individual for him producing a sample of his DNA. This DNA was immediately taken to the FDLE crime lab for comparison. They had already began to develop and identify an individual. Just yesterday morning, we received notice from the lab that we had a match. Detective Tolbert worked feverishly throughout the day, putting together the necessary paperwork for a warrant to be issued for his arrest. And almost immediately we began searching for this individual. We knew he was homeless and we had to try and locate him once again. I'm proud to say that approximately 5:30 this morning, Mr. McGee was located. He was taken here to the Lakeland Police Department where he was interviewed, and subsequently he admitted to his actions and corroborated the statements that were provided to us by the victim. Mr. McGee indicated that it was his intent to sexually assault the victim, however, she convinced him otherwise. Early this morning, he walked detectives through the crime scene along Lake Hollingsworth and pointed out the specific areas in which this incident occurred, which verified the account again of what the victim had told us. Mr. McGee is currently in one of our holding cells downstairs and will soon be transported to the Polk County Jail. As you're aware, he's being charged with attempted sexual battery and kidnapping. I would like to publicly commend the actions of Detective Paula Tolbert and her supervisor, Sergeant Chip Roberts, for their tenacity and feeling of urgency to clear up this high-profile criminal act that caused this community such great concern. They each worked vigilant and spent a great many hours, both before work and after their normal duty hours, trying to solve this case. And I couldn't be prouder of each of them. I would also like to thank FDLE's Crime Lab for working so closely with us and giving us a feeling of urgency in solving this case. They had a great many cases that were there before ours, but they chose to work closely with us to clear this. And to the members of our patrol division, our crime lab, our public safety aides, our analysts, and our forensic artists, and everyone else who contributed to this case as well, each clearly has demonstrated the Lakeland Police Department's commitment to excellence, and I couldn't be prouder of everybody. Any questions?
Yeah, it sounds like the DNA was a pretty crucial part to this. Explain again where that came from exactly and when and how important that was.
Well, the scientific evidence in this case clearly identifies him as being the one who committed the act. She had items of clothing on her that morning that were collected, as well as some DNA that she actually scratched the individual at some point, and we were able to get some samplings under her fingernails. And for whatever reason, he decided to, as she was jogging, she had earphones in her earbuds in her ears, and he decided to put one of those in his ear and listen to what it is that she was listening to. And I'm proud to say that each of these items that were collected came back with his DNA on it. So there was absolutely no doubt scientifically that he's the one who did this.
Where was he located?
He was located this morning attempting to go to his place of employment.
Where?
Well, he works for a temporary service.
You said he was homeless. Did he have a place he went to regularly to go sleep at night?
He arrived being driven by what he identified as being his girlfriend, but where specifically that was, I don't know. All indications are that he was homeless.
Was there any indication that it was near that place where he committed the crime?
I'm unsure of that right now.
Okay, so you're saying that the earwax from him was a key piece of evidence?
It was one of the three key pieces of evidence, that's correct.
And the other being that he grabbed her clothes, so you were able to get some sort of...
Touch DNA from her clothing as well, and as well as some of his skin samplings from under her fingernails.
What would be the benefit to him? I mean, there's a lot of evidence against him, but you said he walked detectives through the crime scene this morning. Why would he do that?
Well, I think, personally, I'd like to believe that it was his conscience that was telling him to do this. He initially, in the interviews, started sidestepping some of the issues that he was being asked with, and ultimately, when confronted, he began to open up as to what actually occurred. And what was interesting is, you know, Sergeant Gross pointed out earlier that he identified himself by name as the actual encounter occurred, and he identified himself as having come from Mississippi. These were two key pieces of evidence in this case as well, because, as you can see, his name is clearly William, and interestingly enough, he was born in Mississippi. Of him, he has an extensive criminal record. Yes, he does. And I believe those are going to be provided to you as well.
Is there any indication that he wasn't fully there? Do you think he understood what he was doing?
Initially, he began to tell a tale of shadows and spirits talking to him, but he recanted that and ultimately confessed to everything.
Did he plan on doing this more? Did he feel after he almost got caught the first time, did that kind of slow him down?
There were several other incidents after this occurrence about an individual who had been seen in 3 other occasions during the past month that appeared to be committing a lewd act on himself. We suspect that this is the very same individual. In those particular cases, the witnesses to these acts didn't actually see, he had his hand in his pants, and the assumption was that he was doing what they suspected he was, but he never at any point exposed himself. It appears as though he has issues with this, and all of which he admitted to, but nothing was visible at the time. So those charges unfortunately can't be rendered.
And it sounds like your first victim here was pretty smart in how she handled this guy. Do you think he was fully ready to commit rape on this woman?
Absolutely. What Sergeant Gross pointed out, the fact that she personalized this was our initial observation as well. She was able to talk him through it and put herself in a position where she could run away and phone for help. I think that contributed to this. He clearly admitted that it was his original intent to perform a sexual battery on her. And for whatever reason, he changed his mind, and for that, we're grateful.
He was on the streets still today? He would still do the same thing?
Well, we could only hope not, but the possibility certainly does exist.
Looking back on this situation, what advice can you give those who enjoy Lake Hollingsworth for jogging, running, and stuff like that? What's some advice you can give?
Well, I certainly like to feel that the Lakeland Police Department has restored their sense of safety along the lake. It certainly brought to us a feeling of perhaps more importance that we need to spend a great deal more time there. We're well familiar with this location. It's one that the community comes out at all hours of the day and night and goes around and walks and runs and exercises and everything. Certainly, the public needs to be vigilant when they're walking the lake. Always be mindful, and I think in this particular case, she was fortunate that she had a cell phone with her. Her recollection was that as she was running, she could hear him coming up behind her, and her initial observation was that he was about to pass her. She actually moved out of the way of the track. When he got closer, he subsequently grabbed her, and that's why we are where we are today.
You mentioned she personalized with the suspect. Is that a technique that you guys encourage for fighting?
I think in this particular case, it's something that seemed to work very well. Personalization is always probably best. I would personally encourage it. I think it's proper. It helped her garner some information that helped lead to his arrest as well. It identified him. He had the opportunity to see a real person. She described to him some of her personal life experiences and health conditions of family members and such, and I think that certainly contributed to him not continuing his act.
Do you know how much time they actually spent together before she was able to run away?
My recollection was about 20 minutes or so,
10 or 15.
10 or 15 minutes. Any other questions? I thank you. Momentarily, we'll be transporting him to the Polk County Jail. Thank you.